Chapter 22 includes references and implied sexual abuse, alongside some suicidal implications. If you can't sit through that, then don't listen to the chapter. Jason's Birds by Coven YT 2950 and Legolin 3791. Chapter 22. It should be scary how easily he could suppress every thought and emotion connected to Khan when he started to recover himself. But it wasn't. He was used to that. He had to be in the first months after his best friend's death, or he wouldn't be able to find a way to bring him back. And even after he failed so spectacularly, there was no way Tim could be, at least, functional again without ignoring the hole in his heart and the pain threatening to break him at every chance. Sometimes it would hit him while he was sitting on his bed, working and deprived of sleep, for him to just allow it to take over him as he cried like a baby. They weren't his best moments, but Tim was able to pull himself together when he woke up after falling asleep after exhaustion, continuing to work. That was what he always did. Keep trying, no matter what. It was what made him so good at his job, and it was what he needed to do now. Khan would want him to do that. He was that good. The door opened suddenly, taking him by surprise, and causing him to wipe the few tears that were still rolling down his face, looking up with the best blank expression he could. "Hey, little bird, I suppose you didn't have a great time without me?" Jason asked sarcastically, walking inside and closing the door behind him with his foot. He was carrying 2 trays, with one plate in which food was on it, and a fork and a knife beside it, with 4 bottles of water alongside. That wasn't Hood. The body language was different, and there wasn't something off about him telling Tim that he was in danger. There was no way it was him. But the last hours had proved that Hood was beyond anything he had supposed or expected to be happening to Jason. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. He had to be sure. "Jason?" Tim questioned, frowning. Tim didn't like how he tensed for a moment. Hood didn't exactly scare him, but he made him cautious enough to not let down his guard, something Jason had already overcome against his will only a few days ago, with a few kind touches. He was pathetic, and Tim couldn't help but consider that he was so weak that Hood would be able to do the same soon. After all, it had been easy for Hood to destroy him mentally, even if only for a few moments. He just had to mention Khan, and every other thought, any plan, disappeared from his mind immediately. "In flesh and bone," Jason said, and put the trays on the bedside table. "And no dark entity. For now." He didn't know what took over him, but as soon as he had the confirmation, Tim pulled Jason towards him and hugged him tightly, resting his cheek on his shoulder. It was just good to feel that this was not Hood, not the one that was probably driving Jason crazy and used Khan to manipulate him. This was his brother. He breathed deeply, sensing Jason slowly putting his hands around his torso and hugging him back. For a moment, they just stayed like that. But of course, it wouldn't last long. "Maybe I should let Hood possess me more," Jason snorted, immediately causing Tim to remember what he did and pushing him away, scowling. "You asshole!" Tim exclaimed angrily. "How did you think shooting yourself in the head was somehow a good idea? You could have died, Jason! Again, Hood isn't worth that." And he did die. By what Hood said, Jason was dead, and he brought him back to life. Tim wasn't able to stop him from dying, even when he could have this time. He couldn't deny that Bruce and Dick are right in considering him worthless. It was more than fair. "Aw, you're worried about me. That's so cute, Timmers," Jason said humorously, making Tim involuntarily blush. Yeah, he was stupid for being concerned about his kidnapper. He had already accepted that, but it wasn't like he could just start hating Jason. He couldn't even do that when he almost killed him. How could he now? But he still stared at him with a cold look, not liking how cool he was with what he had done. If he had found out about Hood, going as far as to kill himself for it, why was he acting like that? Okay, calm down with the death stare. I never thought it was a good idea in the first place, Timmy," Jason explained, unpretentiously, then opening his arms. "But I'm alive, right? That's what matters." No, it wasn't. Not when his behavior finally made sense. His stomach sank. You knew that was possible. You knew about Hood. Timmers stated accusingly, even if he was more curious than mad. Since when was Jason aware of that? How did it happen? Tim was well informed about all the threats, human, meta, or magical, that the heroes had knowledge of, and none of them had any connection with the pit, besides Roz, or matched the same characteristics of Hood. At least, not completely. Fine. It's time for an honest talk. Jason sighed, gesturing at him. Move to the side. Tim didn't have time to react to that, doing what he was told, as he watched Jason sit shoulder to shoulder next to him on the bed, resting his back on the headboard and stretching his legs. It was too close, reminding him of a distant memory. Dick used to do the same when he started living in the mansion, passing an arm around his shoulders in the middle of the talk and letting him snuggle onto his chest. Back then, he truly believed that, maybe, Dick loved him, even if not as a brother, but at least as a friend. How stupid he was. No, I fucking didn't. Jason confessed tiredly, not looking at him and crossing his arms. I supposed when you woke up, and the only way of confirming it was doing what I did. I don't regret it. Of course he didn't. Tim rolled his eyes, intentionally. After all, Tim was the one that didn't have any self-preservation, even when Jason existed. But you knew what he was, or you wouldn't have supposed it. Tim argued, deciding to focus on that. Honestly, Jason faced him and shrugged. I only knew what Talia told me. He should be a myth. A dark entity or some shit like that. He feeds on tortured, murdered souls, and, supposedly, the power of the pit comes from him. That wasn't possible. Tim frowned. He would have known about that myth, and if it was likely to be true or not. He knew Roz more than anyone. It could be kind of arrogant to think that way, but Tim was sure of that. For the worst or best. Definitely worst for most of the time. And did you believe her? Timmy questioned, continuing exasperatedly when Jason raised his brows. Roz is egocentric, hungry for power, obsessive and controlling, but he isn't stupid. He wouldn't risk using the pit or letting anyone do it if there was a possibility of such a powerful entity that he couldn't control rising. Talia had to have lied to Jason. There should be another explanation for Hood. Tim couldn't have missed something again, not in the only thing he was sure he did right. First, I have to note how damn scary it is that you actually know Roz that well. Timmers, you will tell me everything about it someday. Jason threatened with an analytical look. Shit. Tim wasn't anxious to have that day. No one had to know what sick shit he had done for Roz to bring Bruce back. Not when his goal was achieved, and he also had to deal with the League of Assassins. It was a small price that he would pay again for his family, and even if he knew they probably wouldn't care, after all, that had just been a part of his job, Jason was in a delicate state of mind. He would react badly, for no reason. And second, it doesn't matter how old that sucker looks. He isn't as old as the pit. He found that shit and didn't have any reason to believe that a stupid myth was real. Not when the pit always gave him everything he fucking wanted. Jason explained arrogantly with a smirk. In a way, Jason was right. Maybe Tim didn't miss something, but Roz could have. Mainly if he was getting what he wanted. That had been how Tim took him down. It was the best way to manipulate him. And if he was a dark entity like Hood, it wouldn't be hard for him to do the same for centuries. But why? What would he gain from it? Unless... He used Roz, Tim whispered in realization. You said he feeds on tortured, murdered souls. And who provided that with stability better than the League of Assassins for centuries? Hood was gaining power as the League grew. Of course, not everyone was brutally killed by them, but they were one of the greatest obscure organizations, with focus on that. There was no better place for him to exist and not be detected by someone, if that was what he really wanted. So what? It's fucking Ra's al Ghul. Jason sneered. Why do we care if he was used? Tim sighed. Did Jason really not see it? You're missing the point. That's madness. You know that, right? Tim asked. If that myth is right, nothing like him does anything without having an obscure reason. He's most likely using you too. And he couldn't let that go on. even if Jason couldn't see the clear danger, as he showed when he started laughing, as if Tim had said something funny. Don't you think I fucking know that? I was in that psycho's mind. I saw what he did while using my body, what he felt and thought. Jason scoffed. He isn't really reliable, you know. Tim scowled. Why are you so cool with that then? He couldn't understand. Jason didn't take shit from no one. In that way, he was just like Bruce, facing whatever went against him, no matter how powerful it was. It made sense that Bruce had chosen him, even after seeing him try to steal a wheel off the Batmobile. Tim had to force him to accept him as Robin. God fucking damn it, you're so stupid, Timbo. Jason rolled his eyes, turning his body to him and getting serious. He can give you what you want. He can give you Khan. How can you say no to that? Tim froze. Wait, what? Jason would allow something like Hood to use his body just because of him? For him to be happy? He felt tears filling his eyes, swallowing the knot in his throat. Of course you can say no to that, Tim shouted, gesturing angrily. It's your body. You have no idea what Hood is capable of, or what he might do when he's in control. This is my business. You can't... I can't what? He was interrupted by Jason snarled, his hands holding his wrists firmly as their gazes locked. He tried to stay firm, but he couldn't lie to Jason at that moment. He had already seen Tim at his worst moments, and although he was the cause of some of them, he also comforted him when he needed it. You can't do that for me. Not for me, Jason, Tim admitted, his features contorted in anguish. I'm not worth it. Jason's eyes widened for a moment, a mix of emotions shining in them. But the silence and lack of reaction corroded Tim from the inside, as he refused to avert his eyes, and they stared at each other. He was ready for Jason to finally abandon the act, for Hood to reveal that he was just mentally and emotionally manipulating his brother, making up this sudden care and obsession over taking care of him. It would hurt, but he could take it. He always did. But he wasn't ready for Jason to release one of his wrists and gently hold his left cheek, a tender but serious expression on his face. You are my little brother, Tim. Of course you're worth it. I'm sorry I was stupid enough to never show you that, but it's true, Jason said, swallowing and giving him an apologetic look. I didn't attack you in the tower because I didn't think you deserved to be Robin. It was because, deep down, I knew you did. I knew you were better than me, that Bruce had found a son that hadn't come from trash, and a Robin that was smarter than I could ever be. Jason choked out, his voice cracking in a way Tim had never seen it. That was why I wanted to destroy you. To break you until I showed him that you were just some stupid kid that could never take my place. I wanted it to hurt him. What was Jason saying? Bruce didn't care enough about him to be hurt about what he did. Guilty and worried? Yes, but only because he didn't want to have another Robin's death on his conscience. Bruce never stopped loving Jason. It didn't matter what Tim did. He could never be on Jason's level, both as Robin and as a son of Bruce. Jason had to know. No, that isn't true. Bruce... He tried to correct Jason, but he stopped him. No, shut the fuck up, Timmy. You listen to me. Jason brought their faces closer, looking into his eyes. I'm sorry for that night. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I made a mistake, okay? And I can't make up for that enough. But you need to know that I'm sorry for making you think I hated you when I didn't. No, that didn't make sense. Jason was apologizing to him for the tower attack? That wasn't real. It couldn't be. But he seemed so honest, so vulnerable. He couldn't be lying or manipulating him. Could he? Tim would see the signs if it was a trick. Wouldn't he? Jason seemed to read his mind, because he snarled angrily, his grip getting tighter, but in a strange, comforting way. It's not a trick, little bird. You are worth it. You are part of this family, and you deserve to be loved and cared for. Even Hood can see that shit, and he isn't even a fucking human. Why can't you see that? It's just... It wasn't that simple. Tim truly believed now that Jason saw it that way. But he wasn't really sane at the moment. He could have been mentally manipulated by Hood, as he expected, which would mean Jason didn't really care about him, and this was all made up by Hood, for some distorted reason. This was most likely possible. Tim should choose to believe that. But honestly, he didn't want to. He was tired of it. Do you really believe that? That I'm worth it? Tim questioned hesitantly, a part of him still afraid of the answer. I do. If you weren't worth it, I wouldn't have done it all for you. Believe me. Jason snorted with a small smile that, although warmed Tim's heart, he couldn't let Jason allow his body to be used for him. It's my life, Jason. You can't do what you're doing. Tim tried to argue, shaking his head, but Jason only sneered. I always did what I wanted, Tim. I'm not going to stop now. This is my choice, too. You deserve better. Our family does. And I will do anything to prove that to you, Jason declared, with so much care that Tim felt a lonely tear fall down the cheek he wasn't holding, looking down shamefully. He couldn't keep looking at Jason. Not now. It was too much. Slowly, he felt himself being pushed to Jason's chest, hesitantly resting his face on it, and just enjoying in silence the sensation of his brother's arm caressing his hair and his back. It was so peaceful, so good. It couldn't be an act or manipulation from Jason or Hood. Tim knew and experienced the touch of someone who only wanted to use him. This wasn't it. Jason cared about him, against all common sense. He did, even if it was for the worst reasons, for unrealistic ones. Tim wasn't as good as he made him seem, as worthy. If Jason knew everything Tim was capable of, and what he had done, he would know it. He was just a rich, privileged boy who wasn't good enough for his family to love him, and tried to fill that hole in his heart by struggling to be part of a family that never had a place for him. It wasn't fair that Jason was doing it all for him, that he was sacrificing so much and becoming something he wasn't, again, just for him. He was the one who truly deserved better between them. Jason had more than he ever thought he did. Tim just wished he could see that. Chapter 23. Tim. You need to let go so we can eat, little bird. Jason spoke humorously, as if he wasn't the one holding Tim against his chest and stroking his hair. Or are you getting all clingy on me? Asshole. But surprisingly or not, he was the only one who loved Tim, even if it was for the wrong reasons. Probably because he wasn't quite sane. His Robin loved him. Tim breathed deeply against Jason's chest, enjoying the sensation for a moment, before reminding himself that there were more important things to worry about than the way he felt. There always were. Very funny, Tim scoffed, and pushed slightly against Jason's chest, straightening up and ignoring how a part of him just wished that his brother's hands kept holding him. He had to stop. It didn't matter how there was this warmth in his heart, a craving for more of the loving words and touches of someone that he now knew loved him. Tim could not allow that. Just because Jason loved him, it didn't mean he could start allowing himself to think he could have everything he wanted. Not when the possibility was more real than ever. Tim couldn't forget why he had delayed Hood's offer. It was too dangerous for him to hope and believe. No, I'm serious, Timmy. I don't play when it comes to making sure you don't mess with your health again, Jason said reproachfully, as if he were Alfred, but it didn't work as much as with him. And, in his defense, Tim had taken the League of Assassins down on only coffee. His health wasn't that important, or he would be dead by now. Says the guy who broke my leg. There wasn't as much snark in his tone as Tim expected, but he knew it was useless to discuss how healthy he was with Jason, and he needed a good response. Damn, little brother. I thought we had forgotten that. I didn't know you could hold a grudge, Jason snorted with a shit-eating grin. Tim was about to retort when he watched Jason pick up a tray and hand it to him, holding it instinctively, and getting his attention caught by the food on the plate, like it hadn't before. Wait a minute. Jason didn't cook like that. It couldn't have been him who made it. Who cooked this, Jason? Tim scowled, even though he was already certain who it was. He had to hear it from Jason. What do you fucking mean, Timbo? Jason frowned. More curious than suspicious, though. No, Tim didn't have time for that. Why couldn't Jason focus on what really mattered for once? I know you have Dick here. What would make you think that? Jason smirked with a raised eyebrow. He seemed amused, not actually worried about Tim finding out, which probably meant he wouldn't confirm it unless he got what he wanted to know. Tim just would have to be fast, then. You can't cook like that. I've watched you enough to know that. I also know that there are two people in our family who know exactly how to cook this kind of food well, and they are Alfred and Dick. And if I were to bet on who you would kidnap, I would go for Dick. Tim explained quickly, remembering how good it was to live in the manor, so close to the people he loved. But it had been exactly because of that he had left. Wait a fucking second. Watched me enough? Oh no, Timmers. Have you been stalking me? Jason asked with a scoff, shaking his head in false disappointment. I can't understand how Dad Bats gets to pass his creepy behaviors to his kids. I swear I must be the only one immune to whatever shit he does. Tim would disagree, but he was too busy blushing for the moment. Okay, yeah, he had stalked Jason after he became a vigilante again, but it was for good reasons. He needed to know if he was okay, since Jason wouldn't ask for help or support from the other bats as often as he should, and the only way he'd find out about it would be to watch over him. He might have gone too far sometimes, breaking into his safe house to check his supplies and food conditions, but the risk of being shot was still high, so he made sure to be careful. It wasn't a big deal. Tim was just looking out for Jason, and he only took such disparate measures after Bruce was gone. Someone had to support his family, even in the ugly ways, and he was perfect for that. Being disposable and ignored had its advantages. I can explain later, Jason, so just tell me. Is Dick here or not? Tim questioned firmly, but with a pleading look. It was obvious. Jason was having fun, but he needed him to remember Dick was more important than him. Fuck. Tim couldn't help but feel guilty. Jason's love for him was the cause of Dick's suffering. How did he always find a way to cause pain to the people he loved, even through good things? It would be better if Jason hated him like before. Okay. No need to stress, little bird. Yep, Dick is here. Aren't you happy to have your big brother close? Jason asked, amused with a grin. No, I'm not happy that you kidnapped Dick. You know I don't want anything you're doing. Why did you do that? Why did you take Dick? Tim exclaimed indignantly. He knew before that there was a high chance of Dick being the other person in the bunker, but being sure was different. Dick should be safe. That was why he made a deal with Jason. My goal is to give our family what they deserve, Tim Bitts. What did you think I meant by that? That I would just let Dick mess around thinking he could stop me and defending Bruce's bullshit when he could be with us, with you? Jason snorted and tilted his head. No, Jason was wrong. Just like Hood, he couldn't understand it. Dick being with them wouldn't do any good. It wouldn't make him care about Tim, because of course he wanted it. That was all he ever wanted, since Dick hugged him at the circus when he was a child. But he had accepted a long time ago that he couldn't have that, and kidnapping Dick wouldn't be the way to make it finally happen. There were just some things that couldn't be forced. It wasn't the deal, Jason. You lied to me. Tim snarled hurtfully. That was the moment the spark of fun in Jason's eyes finally disappeared. I don't lie, little brother. I wasn't the one to kidnap Dick. It was Hood, and he is safe here. I'm not going to hurt him, but I won't let him go either, so don't even try. Jason stated calmly, eyes seemingly very green in the light. It gave him shudders, but Tim looked for any sign that he was lying to him about Hood doing it or hurting Dick, but he didn't find any. The worst part, he believed him, even before confirming that. Even if it made sense, that wasn't good at all. Tim was starting to lose his logic to his emotions, which never did any good. Mainly when Hood was involved. Hood? Right. Then tell him that I included him in our deal. And if he thinks about saying no, I will break it, Jason. I'm not playing around. Tim said incisively, ready to do what he had to if Jason disagreed. He knew he didn't have much power, and that he was possibly risking Hood's offer to him. But he couldn't have Hood walking around the city and doing whatever he begged Jason not to. Dick was already a victim of his mistake, and as much as Tim wished, it was obvious Jason wouldn't let him go unless by force. So, the least Tim could do was to not let any other member of his family be another victim. That shit doesn't work like that, Timmy. We don't talk. Jason rolled his eyes, grabbing the other tray and putting it on his lap. "But no worries. You will get your message, and I will make sure he listens. So chill and eat your damn food." Did it? So, how did they communicate? Did Hood know everything Jason did? There were so many questions Tim wanted to ask, but they immediately disappeared from his mind when he realized Jason said nothing about Dick. What? No! What about Dick? I need to talk to him. It's the least you can do after what Hood did, Tim argued. He had to see Dick, to check on him. It had been so many months since they had seen each other, and while he knew that, in other circumstances, his older brother wouldn't even want to see him, he could get over that in order to get out of here and help Jason. And Tim. He had to protect Dick from whatever Jason or Hood could come up with. He wouldn't be able to live with himself if Dick suffered even more because of him. "Oh no, don't come with that bullshit, Timbo. I will let you see him, but only after you eat, as I fucking asked," Jason ordered, holding his chin tightly and raising his head when Tim opened his mouth to discuss. "And that's not debatable, Tim. Not this time." He closed his mouth. The less sane part of him wanted to push Jason further, to try more. But the way Jason's eyes stared into his soul made it clear that he wasn't joking around. Tim knew how to choose his battles. "All right, I will eat," Tim agreed and gently held Jason's wrist. "But then I talk to Dick, right? You promise?" It was like a light bulb switched on. Jason gave an ironic smile, no trace of the dangerous expression from before left as he messed his hair. "Of course, little brother. I cross my heart." Tim didn't quite believe that, but it wasn't like he had any other choice. He nodded and started eating, catching a glimpse of Jason eating, but glancing up at him with a satisfied look. Tim preferred to ignore it. He wasn't hungry, which was strange since he had slept for almost 2 days, but his body had become used to hunger a long time ago, so that was probably why. He barely experienced the true feeling nowadays, only knowing he had gone too far by the monitoring of its physical and mental consequences. But Tim couldn't say that it wasn't good to eat. Dick's food had always been great in its simple way, not as sophisticated as Alfred's, but equally delicious. It was just one of the things he missed from being close to his older brother, but learned to live with in his absence. After all, wasn't his life reduced to that? Someone had to make the sacrifice so others who deserved more could have it. Tim was created in the perfect circumstances to be that. It was just fair that he accepted that duty. "God damn it, little bird. Slow the fuck down. Dick can wait." Jason's voice took him out of his thoughts and made him realize how fast he was eating. Having eaten almost all of the food on his plate already. But that was how he normally had his meals. Quickly and objectively. Tim didn't have time to enjoy them, not when he could be doing much more important things instead, like talking to Dick now. "You never specified how long I had to take to eat." Tim shrugged and continued to finish his meal, noticing that Jason's plate wasn't in a much different state. Was it because of Hood? It had to be. When he watched Jason, he always took his time with his food, even when it was to eat a hot dog during a shooting. Yeah, he was totally the most reckless of the family, Tim thought sarcastically. "Well, I am now. Next time you better slow down, or I'm going to feed you myself." Jason smirked, causing Tim's eyes to roll, but his cheeks to blush a little. It was the second time Jason threatened to do that, and Tim truly didn't get the appeal. Could it be because Jason loved him? It had to be. It had been a long time since he experienced real love from his siblings, but Dick never tried to feed him unless he was sick. And he wasn't sick now. It didn't make sense. "Of course you will. But not today, Jason. I ate. Where's Dick?" Tim questioned sharply, still accepting the bottle of water Jason handed him and drinking a bit, though. It wasn't coffee, but he would take it. "I'll bring him to you, Timmers. But first, you need to get how this will work out. I'm not going to let Dick trigger you into a panic attack just like I did." Jason seemed truly pissed off and melancholic when he mentioned his panic attack, with an empty look in his eyes. Tim he never had that. No one but Khan knew about this issue he had, and it was only because he accidentally found out when one night Tim committed the mistake of letting his emotions get the best of him in the tower, and Khan overheard his heartbeat racing. His best friend comforted him and promised to not tell the rest of the team after his pleas, and Tim learned his lesson. So it was new to him to have anyone else worry about his panic attacks, and honestly, it felt good. Of course, there was no reason for Jason to be concerned about Dick causing one. Dick could never truly hurt him. Everything he could have done to cause him pain, he already did, and Tim got over it. But still, his heart warmed with the strange and newfound sensation of being loved by his Robin. Okay, you don't have to worry about that. Dick won't do that. I'll be fine. Tim reassured Jason in the hope that he would forget about it. But, as always, Jason just loved to make all of his efforts useless. Oh, so naive, little bird. That's really cute. But I gotta be the wise one here. Jason scoffed, as if Tim was too stupid to get what he meant. And I'm serious. If Dick hurts or stresses you, I'll take him out. I don't care if he meant it or not. There's no second chance. Tim could deal with that condition. He was capable of controlling his emotions, mainly with something as important as his proximity to Dick at risk. Fuck no. I see what you're thinking. No fucking lies or hiding emotions, Tim. Not anymore. Jason ordered, holding Tim's head between his hands, but his features were contorted in something he couldn't identify right now. It could be despair, concern, or just anger, but Tim knew something. And it was that Jason wouldn't be happy if he noticed that Tim was doing any of that in the near future. The key word was if he noticed, and he would guarantee that he wouldn't. Tim was well aware that Jason had become a specialist in seeing through him, which was annoying, but at least with Dick there, maybe Tim could come back to be good enough. I get it, okay, I get it. Tim admitted falsely, moving on quickly for Jason not to realize what he was doing. Tim held Jason's cheek, watching him glance at his hand in confusion, but then look back at him. I will tell you if I need a pause. I will tell you if I need him to leave. I will. Tim whispered, with begging eyes. Just trust me on this, Jason. Like I trusted you to take care of me. Please? Jason smiled for a moment. A smug smile. That was when Tim realized his attempt hadn't gone really well. I'll pretend that I don't know what you're doing, because I really like it, Timbits. But good luck next time. His brother released his face and winked, patting his head and leaving the bed. I mean it, Jason, Tim exclaimed weakly, already missing Jason's body next to his. Fucking touch starvation. Tim had to control himself better. I'm sure you are. Jason snorted and rolled his eyes, heading towards the door and opening it. They were greeted by the sight of Dick sitting slumped on the ground, leaning against the opposite wall, looking miserable. Dick? Tim whispered at the same time Dick's eyes widened as he slowly got up, staring at him. His older brother was there. He really was there. Tim! Dick gasped, and immediately stumbled towards Tim, only being stopped by Jason, who wrapped his arm around Dick's abdomen and held him in place. Wait, why was Jason doing that? Tim was about to question, but didn't have to. Oh, fuck no. Who said you could enter like that? Jason questioned mockingly, causing Dick to look at him in clear despair, while Tim frowned at his next words. You need permission for that stuff, big brother. Your days of doing whatever you want without thinking about the consequences are over. Jason, Tim said angrily, not understanding why Jason was acting so mean towards Dick. Permission? Why would their older brother need permission for something so little? You were the one who said I could see Tim, Jason. You told me, Dick retorted, facing Jason with a look of anticipation. For a moment, Tim was ready to interfere as he watched Jason scowl. He didn't believe Jason would hurt Dick, mainly not after he promised, but he knew that he could snap easily when he was mad. Keep that attitude, and stress or hurt Tim, and I'll drag your ass out of here, Dickie, Jason threatened with a manic smile. But his tone made it obvious he wasn't joking. And he could do that. He warned Tim about that too, and if Dick crossed the line, he wouldn't be able to stop Jason. He won't. Dick immediately turned to face him with startled eyes. Right, Dick? Tim stated, locking his gaze with Dick's. Please just follow my lead. At least this time. Tim tried to pass the message through his look, internally begging for Dick to do it. Thankfully, he did. Yes, I won't hurt Tim, Dick said, like a promise. Heard that before. Jason sneered and looked between their faces, but released Dick, who immediately moved away from him and towards Tim. Are you okay, little bird? Dick rushed to the bed and checked Tim's injuries, lingering over his leg and the healing stab wound on his shoulder. Although Jason had the same nickname for him, Tim missed the way it sounded when Dick called him that. But he didn't have time to enjoy it, noticing how Dick's fingers trembled and how he stayed between him and Jason at all times. Was Dick actually worried about him? Couldn't he see that Tim was fine? What happened? Dick's voice was gentle, but Tim could see his jaw tighten. Who did this? He didn't understand. Dick was asking the wrong questions. I'm fine, Dick. What happened to you? You're hurt. Tim carefully reached up to touch the giant bruise spreading across Dick's ribs, but only hovered his fingers over it. It was clearly a bullet bruise, and it looked bad. Bad enough to make Tim's blood boil, lighting up his fury towards Hood. It wasn't right. Jason or Hood could hurt him. But Dick? He was innocent. It didn't matter how angry Tim had been at him once. That was what Dick would always be. He didn't deserve this. Don't everyone look at me at once, Jason drawled from where he was leaning nonchalantly on the wall, with his arms folded. The leg is my bad, but Tim came with the stab wound, and I had nothing to do with Dick. But Hood did. Tim would have to have a serious talk with him when he took over Jason's body again. You broke Tim's leg? You said you wouldn't hurt him! Dick whirled around to face Jason, squarely between him and Tim. Wait, what? Was that what Dick paid attention to? Why? He was the one who was shot. Dick, I'm fine. It doesn't matter. Tim reassured him, grabbing Dick's arm. How can you say it doesn't matter? He broke your leg! Tim was suddenly caught by the intense look in Dick's blue eyes as he looked back at him. Yeah, he knew that. He was the one who had his leg broken. Why was Dick insisting so much on it? Careful, Goldie. Are you sure you want to get in a fight about who hurt Tim more? Jason was casually toying with one of his guns now, but his voice was harsh. I'm not the one who abandoned him for 3 fucking months. That wasn't what happened. Dick didn't abandon him. He just couldn't do it anymore. He didn't have time to pretend he gave a shit about Tim. That he loved him as a part of the family. It was okay. He got it. Dick made the right and obvious choice. And that was why there was no reason for Dick to seem to shrink back into himself. He turned back to Tim and caught his hand, holding it softly. He's right about that. I'm sorry, little bird. I should have done better. Dick paused, as if what he would say was too painful, and then met Tim's eyes again, with what could only be described as his normal puppy look. Is it true that you lost your spleen? No, that wasn't going how it should. Tim frowned, trying to keep his calm and understand why his older brother was acting like that. Yes, but that was a while ago, Dick. Really, I'm alright. Is Bruce and everyone else okay? Tim questioned, worried, hoping this time Dick would just let it go. But he didn't. Tim! Dick sounded pained. It's not alright. You could have died. Why didn't you tell me? For a moment, Tim considered just telling Dick to shut up and stop asking those questions about his well-being. He didn't tell him because Dick didn't care. Because it would have just hurt more to know that Dick would put him aside, even after knowing what happened to him. But Tim didn't have the right to feel that, and even less, to act over that feeling. Fuck him. It was nothing. And if he didn't put the conversation back on track, Jason would take Dick away. It wasn't important. I can handle it. You were busy with Bruce coming back and your little brother needing you. I get that. Tim smiled weakly, but a part of him hated to call Damien only Dick's little brother. He thought once, right at the very beginning, that he and Damien could get along. Tim had to admit. He had been a fool, all excited over the possibility of being an older brother to Bruce's blood son. He wasn't exactly perfect for that, not like Dick, but he could try to be. He would have for Damien, even if he knew he didn't ever deserve to still be a member of this family. At least he could mean something to him, be his guide and brother. Of course it didn't last long. Damien was a demon brat from the beginning, pushing each of his buttons, cutting through all his open wounds, and in the end, he showed everyone what Tim already knew, that wasn't his place. He wished he was capable of hating him for it, for hurting and trying to kill him, but he truly couldn't. Not anymore. He had before, provoking Damien back and being mean when he could too. A real idiot. But he just couldn't do it after some time. Tim would always be sad over the fact that he wasn't allowed to be for Damien what Dick was for him before. "Don't excuse his bullshit, Timmy," Jason commented acidically, shaking his head. "It isn't bullshit," Tim grimaced. It was what Jason couldn't see about Tim, the reason the others didn't love him. That was why he thought Dick would disagree with Jason, tell him that, but instead he inhaled sharply, all the color draining from his face. "Tim, you know you're my little brother too, right?" Dick's voice cracked at the last word. For a moment, he felt like laughing bitterly. This had to be an act. Maybe it was Dick's way of not hurting his feelings, because he was too good to just tell Tim he wasn't part of the family. But it was cruel, too. Tim looked blankly at him. "Dick, I told you it's okay. I meant it. Damien needs you. He needs a family. I've been doing fine on my own." Dick crawled closer to Tim, and, almost hesitantly, put his hand on the side of his neck. "Little bird, I swear I didn't know that Damien had tried to kill you again. I'd never have let him get away with that. You should have told me. I would have done something." His voice was hurt and pleading, sounding so honest. "Stop, it wasn't real. Dick didn't mean any of that." Tim had to make him stop. He couldn't deal with that, with all of those lies. "That's all in the past, Dick. I survived. I could still work, and that was all that ever mattered. Could you not make it into such a big deal?" Tim shouted, breathing heavily. He immediately regretted it when Dick looked like his heart was crushed, and Tim realized he had snapped on him. "Oh shit, Jason. See what you did to him, Dickie? That's what your fucked up familiar stupidness caused." Jason scoffed, full of snark and anger, and it seemed to be enough for Dick to snap too. "I know, but it wasn't like you were looking out for him either, Jay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix it now, while you decide to break his leg and kidnap him." Dick spat and got up, standing between him and Jason with his hands clenched in fists. No. That was going down too fast. Dick, come on, it's fine." Tim reached out for Dick's hand, trying to pull him back before he truly pissed Jason off, but it was too late. "No, Timbo, it's not." Jason glanced at him, and then looked back at Dick, pointing at him with his gun. "And I'm not getting into that with you again, Goldie. I never claimed to be his older brother before, and still, I am a better one now." Dick visibly tensed, but did not back down, as he should have, only holding Tim's hand tight. That was when Tim realized it. What was going wrong? It was him. He was the problem. It doesn't change what you've done. You hurt him, Jason, and you keep doing it by keeping him here, by stopping me and the others from fixing our mistakes and doing better," Dick retorted, scowling. "Tim doesn't deserve this." It was like his head was underwater, their voices sounding stuffed. He watched them, the way their expressions were growing more and more stressed, how their body language clearly showed that they were about to throw hands at each other. It wasn't uncommon. They had many fights before, and Tim witnessed some. But this one was different. For the first time, Tim was the source of their disagreement. For the first time, the reason for their discussion was senseless. "You had your chances, and you fucked up. Nothing changed, Dick. Nothing. And you think Bruce will suddenly actually try to be a good father? That Damien will stop being a shitty brat that attempts to murder his own family? No, I won't put Tim under that risk." Jason sneered and gestured with his gun. He was the one between them, stopping them from the reconciliation they could have at that moment. That isn't fair, Little Wing. We might truly not deserve more chances, but we will never stop fighting to be better. I will make sure that Tim won't go through what he did again, Dick said, full of promise he obviously wouldn't be able to keep. This wasn't right. No, Tim had to do something. He had to make them understand that they loved each other, and he wasn't worth them fighting like that. Oh, please. You can't promise that you can take care of him as well as I am. Not when all you care about is keeping this family together, no matter how much it hurts us, Dickie. Also, you can prove to Bruce that you're worth being loved. So maybe then he will finally love you, Jason said between clenched teeth. Dick visibly backed down, and even Tim could feel that hit, although it wasn't directed at him. Jason, that's enough, Tim shouted, and Jason's eyes immediately focused on him, widening. At least he meant it when he said Tim could stop it at any moment. Tim, Dick whispered, seeming lost, and turned to him, a worried expression on his face as Tim pulled him until he was sitting back on the bed. He didn't need that concern. Or, most likely, fake concern. This was his fault. No, you both need to stop. I'm not worthy of you arguing. I'm not what you should be talking about. Tim tried to sound firm and calm in the hope that they'd calm down. No, little bird, Dick started, moving his hand to hold his face, but was cut off by Jason's hand holding Dick's wrist suddenly, who tried to let go of his grip but couldn't. Tim looked at Jason, who had the most serious expression he had ever seen on his face. What should we be talking about then, Timmy? Jason raised his eyebrows, still not releasing Dick, who gave him a look, but was clearly also interested in Tim's answer. Something told him that he should shut up now, to end the conversation, as Jason said he could, that it would be better for the three of them if he did. But Tim was on a mission. He wouldn't back down. You are brothers, Jason. You love each other. What is happening? This is nothing compared to what your relationship went through, and you know that, Tim explained, smiling melancholically. And you also know, more than anyone, that the love between you is worth all the things you did for each other. But not all love is, so don't let anything get between you. Nothing and no one deserves that distinction. Not me. Tim didn't say it, but he really expected that they would get it. That Dick would understand that he didn't have to pretend anything to still be the good person he was. That Jason would stop being so mean to Dick because of him. Because of something so worthless as his life compared to everything they had been through. It was too bad that things never happened the way Tim wanted. Notes. Hey guys, me and my beta struggled a lot with this chapter, and although it didn't end up as we wanted, I'm posting it. But I could use some extra love, or just hear about your opinions and theories. They also meant a lot and inspire me. No hate, please. Jason tries to show Tim that he deserves to be loved, and that he will do anything for him. Also Jason ends up in a discussion with Dick over what is better for Tim. Dick apologizes to Tim for his mistakes and tells him that he matters. Also Dick fights with Jason over what is better for Tim. Tim. Jason is wrong about me, and Dick pretends he cares about me because he is too good for this world. This is all my fault, and I don't deserve any love. Stop fighting for me because I'm not worth it. Dick and Jason. Fuck. New outro time. If you enjoyed this work, you can follow the link in the description below to the author's original work. And if you enjoyed my reading, you can subscribe. Or go down to the description below and follow the link to my Discord, where you can leave recommendations for fics you want me to read in the future. Thank you for listening. Please just follow my lead. Baby. Hi. This is what the people wanted, right? I don't even know if her meows are picking up. He is not coming over the fucking brother complex allegations. Had its